We gave your wedding fund to your sister. She deserves a real wedding. Dad said it like he was proud. I didn't cry. I just looked at my fiancé. He stood up, pulled out his phone and said, "Should I tell them what I do for a living?" My sister's smile disappeared. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. All my life, my father had promised me that the money he'd been saving for my wedding would be there when I needed it. Every year, without fail, he told me, "When the time comes, your wedding fund will be ready. I've been saving since the day you were born." It became this constant, like the seasons changing, something I could always count on. But now, sitting at the dinner table, that promise was being shattered in front of me. I glanced at Michael, my fiancé, his eyes still steady, but I could see the anger starting to simmer beneath the surface. He'd always been calm, collected, the kind of man who never let emotions control his actions. But this was different. I could feel the tension building in the room. My mother's face flushed with guilt, her eyes darting between me and my father. Sophia, sitting across from me, barely looked up from her phone. She didn't have to say anything for me to know what she was thinking. My heart was pounding, each beat a reminder of how quickly everything I thought I knew had fallen apart. The dinner was supposed to be a celebration, a simple meal to discuss wedding plans, but now it felt like a trap. "Your sister needs it more," my dad added, his voice thick with false justification. "She's always dreamed of a big wedding. This is her moment." Sophia's eyes flickered up, that tight smile never leaving her lips. "It's okay, Emily. Don't rush the planning. Weddings are stressful," she said, her tone dripping with something that felt like both pity and mockery. For a moment, I couldn't speak. I just stared at my plate, trying to make sense of what was happening. All those years of hearing the same promise, the assurance that my wedding would be special too, gone in an instant. "I thought this money was for me," I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper, but it was enough. My mom reached over and placed her hand on mine, like she was comforting me. But there was no comfort there, only coldness. "You're practical, honey," she said softly. "You don't need a big wedding. Sophia deserves this. She needs more help. She's always been the one to need extra support." I tried to breathe, but it felt like the air had thickened, like the walls were closing in. My hands were shaking. This was the family I'd grown up with, the ones who told me I could always rely on them. And yet, here they were, choosing my sister over me, choosing her dreams over my own. And then Michael stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. His calm demeanor had shifted. He was no longer just the quiet man sitting beside me. He was angry. It was a new kind of anger, one I hadn't seen before. "Let me get this straight," he said, his voice steady but filled with a controlled rage. "You used Emily's wedding fund, her money, for another daughter's wedding." I looked at my parents. My mother shrank back, but my dad didn't flinch. "It wasn't her money. It was our savings," he said dismissively. Michael shook his head. "You told her for years that this fund was hers. You made promises. You gave her expectations. And now you call her selfish because she feels betrayed." My dad shifted uncomfortably in his seat. But Michael wasn't finished. "No," he said firmly. "You broke your promise, and you humiliated your daughter to elevate another." The room fell silent. Even Sophia stopped scrolling through her phone, her eyes flicking up for a brief moment. Her lips curled into a mockery of a smile. "Well, if you can't afford a wedding," she said with a dismissive shrug, "just do something small. Not everyone needs a fancy ceremony." Michael turned to face her, his eyes sharp. "No one said we couldn't afford it," he said, his voice low. "We absolutely can. That's not the issue. The issue is respect." My heart was racing. I had expected this moment, but now that it was here, I didn't know what to feel. Anger. Betrayal. A crushing sense of defeat. Mom rolled her eyes. "Emily is overreacting," she muttered. We all need to calm down. I stood up, my legs unsteady beneath me. We won't be needing anything from you anymore, Michael said, his voice cold. Not a cent, not a favor, not a blessing, nothing. My dad blinked in disbelief. What are you saying? Michael turned to me, and his hand gently found mine. Emily, let's go. I didn't look back as we left. But before the door closed behind us, I turned around. You didn't just pick a favorite, I said, my voice steady. You picked the wrong daughter to betray. And with that, we left. The silence in the car felt suffocating as Michael drove. The streets blurred by, but I wasn't really seeing them. My mind kept replaying the dinner, the words my father had said, the look on his face when he told me my wedding fund had been given to Sophia. I couldn't understand how everything had fallen apart so quickly. 1 minute, I was talking about flower arrangements. The next, I was hearing that everything I had been promised, everything I thought I could count on, was gone. I had always known Sophia was my parents' favorite. She was beautiful, outgoing, everything I wasn't. But for some reason, I had always clung to the belief that when it really mattered, they would choose me too. They would see me. They would honor the promises they made to me, not just to her. I was wrong. Michael didn't say much as he drove, his grip tight on the wheel, but I could feel the anger simmering under the surface. Not just at my parents, but at the entire situation. He knew how much that wedding fund meant to me, how much I had believed in it. It wasn't just about the money, it was about the trust, the love I thought I'd always had with my family. But now, that trust was shattered. When we got home, I just sat down on the couch, not knowing what to do. My phone buzzed. A message from my mom. Emily, you embarrassed us. Michael overreacted. You owe Sophia an apology. I stared at it for a long time, the words burning in my chest. My parents, my own parents, were treating me like I was the one in the wrong. They didn't even understand. They didn't get it. Michael sat down beside me, his presence a steadying force in the chaos. He took my hand, and for a moment, I let myself lean into him. We'll figure this out, he said quietly, his voice full of calm determination. I wanted to believe him. But all I felt was a deep, gnawing emptiness. 2 days passed. The world outside went on like nothing had happened. But inside, everything was different. I spent the time in a haze, crying, angry, confused. Michael stayed with me, offering comfort, but the pain was too deep. I couldn't understand how my parents could do this. How could they take away the one thing they had promised me? On the 3rd day, Michael walked into the living room with a folder in his hand. He looked at me, his expression serious. We're going to plan the wedding you deserve, he said. And we're going to do it without anyone who treats you like a backup daughter. I blinked, surprised. I had been so consumed by my own hurt. I hadn't even realized how much Michael had been hurting too. But there he was, already taking charge. Already working to fix what I couldn't. He opened the folder, revealing a list of venues, designers, caterers. It was all so organized, so thoughtful that I felt a wave of emotion crash over me. You don't have to do this, I said, my voice thick with tears. You've already done so much. Michael smiled softly. I want to. You deserve more than they've given you. And for the first time in days, I let myself believe it. I let myself believe that there was something beyond the pain, beyond the betrayal. I didn't have to be the quiet, invisible daughter anymore. I didn't have to accept this version of myself, this version of my family. But that feeling of hope was fleeting. Just when I thought I might start to heal, I made a discovery that changed everything. 3 days after the dinner, Michael came into the living room again, this time holding printouts of emails. He handed them to me without saying a word. I scanned the first line and felt the blood drain from my face. We promised to cover an additional $48,000 towards Sophia and Blake's reception costs. My father had signed it. It was my father's email to Blake's parents, promising money he didn't have. Money he expected to take from me, from my future, from my life. The room spun. I couldn't breathe. I read the email again, trying to make sense of it. My father had promised money he knew he didn't have, and he expected me to pay for it. I turned to Michael, my hands shaking. He was going to take it from me, wasn't he? He was going to take it all. Michael nodded, his jaw tight. He would have. He was already planning to come back to you for it. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. This wasn't just a one-time betrayal. This was a pattern. A system built around using me as the backup, as the safety net when they couldn't get what they wanted. This was exploitation. And I wasn't going to let it continue. Not anymore. The realization hit me like a punch. The family I had always tried to love, tried to make proud, had been using me. All my life, they'd treated me like I was secondary, like I wasn't worth the effort. And now they were trying to take the one thing I had left, my future. I stood up, suddenly feeling clear, headed for the first time in days. "I'm done," I said, my voice stronger than I expected. "I'm done letting them control me." Michael's expression softened, but there was no hesitation in his eyes. "I'm with you, Emily. Every step of the way." And in that moment, I knew I had to stop looking back. It was time to take control of my own life, my own future. Time to stop being the backup daughter. The path ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time, I was ready to walk it. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just made a decision that would change my life forever. It wasn't just about the wedding fund anymore. It was about everything. About my entire relationship with my family, and the years of unspoken expectations I had been carrying. The next few days were a blur. I didn't respond to any of my family's messages. I couldn't. Every time I looked at my phone, it felt like another punch to the gut. My mother's texts were filled with guilt. "You're embarrassing us," she wrote. "You owe your sister an apology." My dad's were colder. We were trying to help the family. And then there was Sophia. Her message simply said, "Thanks for making dinner awkward." I didn't care anymore. The words they sent me were just empty. They didn't understand. They never would. It wasn't about a wedding. It was about how they had been treating me my entire life. And how, every time I needed them to stand by me, they turned away. Michael was a constant in all of this. He never pushed me to talk, but he was always there when I needed him. His calm presence was a relief. He was the one person who truly understood the weight I had been carrying. It was early in the morning, 2 days after the dinner, when he came into the living room holding a stack of papers. He sat next to me on the couch, his eyes serious. "We need to talk about this?" he said, placing the papers in front of me. I frowned, looking down at the stack of printed emails. They were from my father. I recognized his name at the top of the page. Michael flipped through the papers, then pointed to the first one. "Your dad promised $48,000 to Blake's parents for Sophia's wedding," Michael said, his voice tight. "He doesn't even have the money. And he was planning to take it from you." I felt a cold rush wash over me. I stared at the words, unable to comprehend them. My father had signed it. His name was right there, promising something he couldn't deliver. Promising money that wasn't his. And he was counting on me to fund it. My hands started to shake as the weight of the situation hit me. I had always trusted my father. I had believed in him, in the promises he made. But now, those promises meant nothing. They were just lies. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" I asked, my voice shaking. I wasn't angry at Michael. I knew he had been trying to protect me. But now, the betrayal I had been feeling wasn't just from my family. It was from everything I had been raised to believe. "I didn't want you to go through this," Michael said, his voice soft. "But now you know the truth." I stood up, pacing the room as I tried to process everything. How could they do this to me? How could my own father think it was okay to take money from me, without even asking? How had I not seen it before? It all made sense now. The way they'd always made me feel second best. The way my needs were always pushed aside for Sophia's. She had always been the priority. And now it was clear that nothing had changed. I was just the backup. The one they could rely on when they needed something. I turned to Michael, my thoughts racing. I have to do something. I can't just let him take this from me. Michael stood up and came over to me. He placed a hand on my shoulder, steadying me. You don't have to do anything you're not ready for, he said gently. But, if you want to take control of your life, if you want to stand up for yourself, now's the time. I looked at him, feeling the weight of his words settle into my chest. He was right. I had been letting family dictate my life for too long. They had been using me, and I had let them. You're right, I said quietly. I'm done being the backup. The decision felt final, like a weight being lifted off my shoulders. But as soon as I made it, a new wave of anger bubbled up inside me. I wasn't just angry at my father anymore. I was angry at myself for letting this happen, for not seeing it sooner. Michael held out his hand. Let's go. Let's plan the wedding you deserve. I nodded, taking his hand in mine. The idea of a future without my family in it felt terrifying, but also freeing. I wasn't sure how we would navigate this new reality, but for the first time in days, I felt like I had a choice. I wasn't bound by their expectations anymore. I could live my own life. As we walked out of the house, I knew that this was the first step toward reclaiming myself. The first step toward breaking free. The weight of what I had learned kept pressing down on me. I had thought my father's betrayal was bad enough, but this new revelation, seeing the proof of his deception in black and white, was almost too much to bear. My own father, someone I had trusted my whole life, had promised money that didn't exist, money he expected me to fund. It wasn't just a broken promise anymore. It was a betrayal that reached deeper, into the very foundation of everything I had ever believed about my family. For the first time, I could see how my parents had been using me all these years. The wedding fund had never been about me. It had always been a tool, a pawn in their manipulation, to give to Sophia when the time came. It was never about honoring a promise. It was about keeping up appearances. About maintaining the balance of favoritism they'd created in our family. That night, after Michael and I left, I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the papers, the words my father had signed. I replayed the conversation in my head over and over, hearing my mother's voice, soft and dismissive, as she told me I didn't need a big wedding, that Sophia deserved it more. My heart twisted each time. Michael stayed by my side, but I could see the worry in his eyes. He knew how much this was hurting me, how much it had all shattered. But he also knew what I needed, even if I didn't know it myself. The next morning, I sat down with him at the kitchen table, feeling the coldness of the empty house surrounding us. It was strange to be alone, in our own space, without the constant intrusion of family obligations. It was quiet, almost too quiet, but it was the first time in days that I felt a sense of clarity. I have to do something, I said, my voice steady. I can't just let this slide. I can't let him get away with this. Michael nodded, his face calm. What do you want to do? I ran a hand through my hair, frustration boiling up inside me. I don't know. But I can't go back to the way things were. I can't pretend like this isn't happening. Michael didn't push me. Instead, he sat back and let me think, knowing that I needed to make the decision on my own, even if it was hard. As the day wore on, I felt a sense of resolve start to build. I wasn't going to let my father use me anymore. I wasn't going to let him keep treating me like the backup, the one who could be counted on when they needed something, and ignored when I needed something in return. By the time evening came, I had made up my mind. I was going to confront my father. I needed answers. I needed him to explain why he had done this, and I needed him to understand how deeply he had hurt me. Michael came with me. He didn't try to stop me or talk me out of it. He simply said, "I'll be there, every step of the way." We arrived at my parents' house, just as the sun was setting, casting long shadows over the front yard. I felt a knot of anxiety twist in my stomach. But I squared my shoulders and rang the doorbell. My mom answered, her face softening when she saw me. "Emily, we need to talk," she said, stepping aside to let us in. "Where's Dad?" I asked, my voice colder than I had intended. "He's in the living room," she replied, her tone guarded. "He's been waiting for you." I walked in, my heart pounding in my chest. My father was sitting on the couch, his expression unreadable. He looked up when we entered, and for a moment, there was a flicker of guilt in his eyes. But it was quickly gone, replaced by a coldness I hadn't seen before. "Emily," he began, but I cut him off.
"Why?"
The word came out before I could stop it. "Why did you do this? Why did you lie to me? You promised me that money for my wedding. It was mine. Why did you give it to Sophia?" My father shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "It's not that simple, Em. Sophia's wedding is important. No." I interrupted, my voice shaking. "It's not just about the wedding. You promised me. And now I find out that you've been planning to take the money from me. You've been planning to use my future to pay for hers. How could you do that?" There was a long pause. My father didn't say anything at first. Instead, he looked at the floor, avoiding my gaze. "I thought I was helping," he said quietly. "Sophia needed it. She's always been the one who needs more. I never meant for you to feel this way." I stared at him, disbelief rising in my chest. "You didn't just take my money. You took my trust. You took everything I believed about our family. And now, you're asking me to just forget it." His eyes finally met mine, and for a moment, I thought I saw regret. But it was fleeting. "I did what I thought was best," he said, his voice low. I could feel the anger rising, but I pushed it down. "I wasn't here for a fight. I was here for answers. You've been choosing her for years, Dad. But this time, I'm done. I'm done being the backup." Michael stepped forward then, his voice calm but firm. "She's right. You broke your promise. And you're going to keep breaking it unless you own up to it. You can't keep pretending it's okay." My father stiffened, his face reddening. "You have no idea what it's like to be a parent." Michael cut him off. "You're not the only one who's been hurt here." There was a long silence, and I could see the walls that had always existed between me and my father begin to crumble, but not in the way I had hoped. There was no apology. There was no real acknowledgement of what he had done. I turned to Michael, my heart heavy. "Let's go," I said, not needing to say another word. Michael put a hand on my back, guiding me toward the door. As we walked out, I could feel my father's eyes on me, but I didn't look back.
"Not this time?"
I was done. And this time, I was taking control of my own life. I didn't respond to any more of my family's messages. The phone kept buzzing with texts, calls, and voicemails, but I couldn't bring myself to even look at them. Each notification felt like another attack, another reminder of the betrayal, and every time I thought about reading the messages, the anger and hurt only grew stronger. I felt the weight of the situation sink deeper into my chest. My father's lies. My mother's indifference. They were trying to pull me back in, trying to make me feel guilty for standing up for myself. And it worked for a while. Every time I looked at my phone, the guilt crept in. Was I being too harsh? Should I have tried harder to understand? But each time I thought about it, I remembered the dinner. I remembered my father's words, my mother's dismissive touch. I remembered the way they had so easily discarded my dreams for their own convenience. It was only after a few days that I realized the truth. I wasn't the one who needed to apologize. They were the ones who needed to face what they had done. And I wasn't going to let them make me the villain in this story. I looked at Michael one evening, the weight of it all still hanging between us. I need to block them. I can't keep doing this. I can't keep pretending like it's all fine. Michael didn't hesitate. You don't have to explain anything to them. They've shown you who they really are. I took a deep breath and blocked every one of them. My mom, my dad, even Sophia. I needed space. I needed time to breathe without the constant pressure of their expectations. And I needed to stop waiting for them to change. They had shown me who they were, and I couldn't keep allowing myself to be part of a family that only saw me as an afterthought. Days turned into weeks, and my world felt quieter. It was strange, like the silence had finally given me room to think clearly. Michael and I began planning our wedding, just the two of us. We met with florists, picked a venue, chose colors, all the things I had once dreamed of. But this time, it felt different. It felt like it was mine. The freedom was overwhelming at first. I'd spent so much of my life making everyone else happy, trying to be the person they wanted me to be. But now, I was doing something just for me. And it felt like the first real choice I had made in years. But then, just as I was starting to feel a sense of peace, the phone call came. I knew it was my mom before I even looked at the screen. I hesitated. Should I answer? Should I let it go? For a brief moment, I thought about ignoring it. But something told me to pick up. Emily? My mom's voice cracked on the other end. Where have you been? Your father and I have been trying to reach you. We need to talk. It's about Sophia's wedding. I felt the anger rise in me again. How could she be asking about Sophia's wedding after everything that had happened? I took a steadying breath before I responded. What do you want? Your father promised Blake's parents $48,000 for Sophia's wedding. And now they're threatening to cancel the venue if we don't pay. Emily, we need your help. I closed my eyes, the words hitting me harder than I had expected. I could feel the old patterns creeping back in, the guilt, the responsibility. But this time, I didn't feel trapped. This isn't my problem, Mom, I said, keeping my voice steady. You made your choice. You and Dad have been planning this without me. You don't get to come to me now and ask for help. There was a pause on the other end. But you're part of this family, my mom said, her voice desperate. You have to help. I replied, the word coming out stronger than I expected. I'm not part of this anymore. You broke my trust, Mom. And I'm not going to fix it for you. She didn't respond immediately, but I could hear the tremble in her voice when she spoke again. You're making a mistake, Emily. This isn't how families work. I felt the familiar pang of guilt, but I pushed it down. Maybe it's time we figure out how to work without me. I hung up, feeling a strange sense of calm wash over me. It was hard, and it hurt, but I knew it was the right thing to do. I wasn't going to let them manipulate me anymore. I wasn't going to be their backup. The rest of the day was quiet. Michael and I didn't say much. We didn't need to. We both knew what had just happened. I had taken the final step toward breaking free, and I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. For the first time in weeks, I finally felt like I was standing on solid ground. I wasn't just a daughter anymore. I wasn't someone they could call when they needed me. I was my own person, and I was choosing to build something better. Later that night, I sat down with Michael to go over our wedding plans. It was simple, intimate, just the way we wanted it. And for the first time, I realized that I was building my future on my terms, not my family's. And that felt like the beginning of something new. I was done waiting for their approval. It was time to live my life the way I wanted to, and nothing was going to hold me back anymore. The days that followed felt like a blur. Michael and I were immersed in planning the wedding, making choices that were just for us. It wasn't the extravagant affair my parents had envisioned for me, but it was exactly what I wanted. Quiet, intimate, and filled with love. The idea of creating something entirely new, without the baggage of my family's expectations, was both freeing and terrifying. But every time I felt doubt creeping in, I remembered why I had to do this. I had to take back my life. Still, the silence from my family was deafening. They didn't stop reaching out. My phone buzzed constantly, but I couldn't bring myself to open any of the messages. Each one felt like an intrusion, like a reminder of everything that had been taken from me. The guilt was still there, gnawing at me. But it was different now. I wasn't apologizing anymore. I was standing firm in my decision, no matter how hard it was. Then, out of nowhere, the message came. It was from my cousin, and for some reason I opened it. "Hey, I just heard the news. Sophia and Blake broke up. It's all over the family group chat." I sat there for a moment, the words not quite registering. Sophia and Blake were supposed to be perfect together. They were supposed to have this dream wedding, this picture, perfect life. And now, it was all falling apart. I scrolled through the rest of the messages, not believing what I was seeing. Sophia was devastated, blaming everyone but herself. The wedding was canceled, the venue was gone, and Blake had walked away. All the plans, all the promises had crumbled. A strange feeling washed over me. Part of me felt vindicated. They had manipulated me, used me as the backup, and now it was all falling apart. But another part of me couldn't help but feel sorry for Sophia. She had gotten everything she had wanted, and now it was gone. Michael came into the room just then, noticing the change in my expression. "What is it?" he asked, leaning over to see my phone. "It's over," I said quietly. Sophia and Blake broke up. Michael looked at me for a long moment before speaking. "It's not your fault, Emily." I nodded, but I wasn't sure if I believed him. There was a part of me that still felt guilty for walking away, for cutting them off. But seeing the fallout from all of this made it clear. My family had chosen their path, and I had chosen mine. I couldn't keep allowing myself to be part of their toxic cycle. The days after the news were strangely quiet. Sophia's wedding, the one that had been so important to my parents, was gone. And now, I was left wondering what would happen next. Would my parents come to me for help again? Would they finally realize what they had done? But as the days turned into weeks, I saw no signs of reconciliation, no apologies, no real acknowledgement of the hurt they had caused. It was as if everything had simply returned to the way it had always been. My family never changed. They just moved on, like nothing had happened. That's when I realized something important. I didn't need them. I didn't need their approval or their constant manipulation. I had Michael. I had our life, our future, and that was enough. I was standing on the edge of something new, something mine. No more being the second choice. No more being the afterthought. For the first time in my life, I was choosing myself. Michael and I had already started making plans for our life together. We were figuring out what we wanted, what we truly needed, and how to build a future that was free from the influence of my family. There was so much I wanted to do. So much I had never allowed myself to dream about before. Now, with Michael by my side, I felt like I could do anything. The wedding we were planning wasn't just a ceremony. It was a declaration of independence, a symbol of my new life. I wasn't going to let anyone define me anymore. Not my father, not Sophia, not anyone. It was my time now. And as we sat together that evening, looking over wedding venues and imagining our future, I knew that I had made the right choice. I had taken control of my life. And nothing would ever take that away from me again. I wasn't just walking away from my family's expectations. I was walking towards something better. Something real. It had been 2 weeks since the phone call with my mom. 2 weeks of silence. 2 weeks of knowing that I had made the right decision, but still struggling to fully accept it. I kept thinking back to that moment, to the words I had said, and each time, it felt like a relief. I wasn't the one who needed to apologize. I wasn't the one who needed to fix things. But then, the phone rang again. This time, it wasn't from my mom. It was from an unknown number. My first instinct was to ignore it. I had been avoiding any and all contact with my family for the past 2 weeks. But something inside me made me answer. Emily. My father's voice came through the phone, strained, like he had been rehearsing what he was going to say. We need to talk. I felt a tightness in my chest. I had been prepared for this moment, but it still caught me off guard. I had already made up my mind. I wasn't going to go back to the way things were. I wasn't going to let them manipulate me again. What is it? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. I need you to come over. It's about Sophia's wedding, my dad said, his voice wavering slightly. Please, Emily. Your mother and I, we don't know what else to do. There it was. The guilt. The pleading. They always knew how to get to me, how to make me feel responsible. I took a deep breath. I'm not coming over, Dad. I'm done being the backup. I'm done being the one you rely on when you've messed up. There was a long silence on the other end. I could hear him breathing, but he didn't say anything. I could practically feel the walls of the house around me. The same walls that had held me for so long, keeping me in a place where I felt like I didn't matter. I'm not asking you to fix anything, my father said after a moment. I need you to understand. We've made mistakes, but we're your family. You're part of this. I felt a flash of anger. It was the same old story. I am part of this. But that doesn't mean I have to keep letting you use me. You're not the only one who's been hurt, Dad. You're not the only one who's suffered. But I'm not going to let you drag me back into this. Not anymore. I could hear the frustration building in his voice. Emily, you're being unreasonable. Your sister is struggling. We can't just let her wedding fall apart. I wasn't sure if he was trying to convince me or himself, but the guilt didn't come. I didn't feel the familiar pull of obligation. For the first time, I wasn't going to be the one to clean up their mess. This isn't my problem anymore, I said, my voice firm. I've already said goodbye to all of this. I'm not going to fix your mistakes. He didn't respond right away. There was a long pause, and for a moment, I thought the conversation might be over. But then, my father's voice came through the phone again, quieter now, like he was finally seeing the truth of what I was saying. I never meant to hurt you, Emily. I never meant to make you feel like you didn't matter. I closed my eyes. It was the first time I had heard him admit that, but it wasn't enough. It didn't change what had happened. I know, Dad, I said softly. But the damage is done. You chose her. You made it clear that I wasn't your priority, and I can't live my life waiting for you to come around. Emily. He trailed off, and for the first time, I could hear the regret in his voice, but I wasn't sure if it was enough for me to let him back in. I'm sorry, he finally said. But I'm not asking for your forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I love you. I felt a lump form in my throat. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know if I was ready to hear him say that after everything that had happened. I know you love me, Dad, I said, my voice shaky. Isn't enough. It never has been. There was silence on the other end for a long moment before my father spoke again. I understand, he said quietly. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. Goodbye, Dad. I hung up the phone, not knowing how to feel. I had expected this conversation to bring some kind of closure, but instead, I was left with a hollow feeling. My father had apologized, but it didn't change what had happened. It didn't change the years of hurt that had been building up. I sat there for a long time, the phone still in my hand. Michael came into the room, sensing the shift in the air. "What happened?" he asked, sitting beside me. I looked up at him, trying to steady my breath. "He apologized," I said quietly. "But I don't know if it's enough." Michael nodded, his expression soft. "You don't have to forgive him right now. You don't have to do anything you're not ready for. You've already made the hardest choice. And that's what matters." I leaned my head on his shoulder, feeling the weight of everything that had happened over the past few weeks. It wasn't over. My family wasn't going to change overnight. But I had changed. And that was the most important thing. The phone call with my father had been the final test, the final push I needed to make sure I was done. I wasn't going to go back. I wasn't going to let them control my life anymore. And with Michael by my side, I was ready to move forward, no matter what came next. The days after the phone call were quieter. I had said my piece, and my father had said his. The conversation hadn't brought the closure I had hoped for. But it had brought something else, a sense of finality. I was done with the past, with the family dynamics that had kept me in their shadow for so long. But there was still a part of me that wondered what came next. What would my life look like, without the ties that had bound me to my family for so long? How would things change? The answer, I realized, was in the wedding Michael and I were planning. It wasn't just about the ceremony, it was about everything that had led up to it. About building something new, something all our own. We had already started, and now, with every decision we made, we were writing the next chapter of our lives. Sophia's wedding drama continued to unfold in the background, but I didn't care anymore. I had heard through the family grapevine that her relationship with Blake had ended over the financial lies, the constant pressure to maintain an expensive lifestyle. I wasn't surprised. I had always known that money and manipulation were at the heart of everything that had gone wrong. I wasn't the one to say, "I told you so." But it was hard not to feel a small sense of vindication. I had spent so many years playing the role of the responsible, dependable daughter, always holding things together while my family took advantage. Now, as I watched Sophia's perfect world crumble, I realized how much of that world had been built on a shaky foundation. There was no satisfaction in it, though. Watching her struggle didn't bring me peace. It just confirmed that the life I was leaving behind wasn't one I wanted to be a part of anymore. Michael and I spent the next few weeks in a bubble. Planning the wedding, making decisions that felt empowering instead of burdensome. It wasn't extravagant, but it was ours. Small, intimate, and filled with people who actually cared about us. It was everything I had been denied in my own family. Then, the day arrived. The day that felt like the beginning of everything. The wedding was perfect in its simplicity. A small ceremony by the lake at sunset, with just a few close friends and family. Michael's eyes were full of emotion as he saw me walk down the aisle. And for the first time, I didn't feel the weight of expectations or guilt. I was just present, living in the moment, and I was finally choosing myself. There was no room for my parents in that moment, no space for the drama they had created. They hadn't come. They hadn't even called. And somehow it didn't hurt the way I thought it would. The reception was light, filled with laughter and warmth, the kind of love I had always wanted, but never knew how to ask for. And when Michael looked at me, his eyes full of pride and joy, I knew that this was where I was meant to be. It wasn't perfect. Nothing ever is. But it was real. And for the first time, I was at peace with the choices I had made. 3 months later, I received a message from a cousin. Sophia and Blake had broken up. He had called off the engagement, fed up with the lies and manipulation surrounding their relationship. There was no wedding. No grand celebration. Just a harsh, unceremonious ending to the life they had tried to build. It was like everything had come full circle. The family I had spent so many years trying to please was falling apart, and I was finally free from their expectations. I wasn't angry at Sophia. I didn't feel satisfaction in her failure. But I did feel a quiet kind of peace. I had finally broken free, and I was starting to understand what that meant. As for my parents, I hadn't heard from them. I didn't expect to. There was no apology, no explanation. The rift between us remained, and I had come to accept that it was permanent. But that didn't scare me anymore. I had built something new, with Michael by my side. We were creating our own family, our own traditions, our own future. And that was enough. As we sat together that evening, Michael's hand in mine, I realized that sometimes, the family you build is more precious than the one you come from. It was never about them. It was about me, about who I had become, and who I was going to be from now on. And for the first time, I felt truly free,